It went on during my lifetime, and this is Wesley Miller, John Wesley Miller, born to Dexter Marley Miller and Augusta Miller, and my mother's name was Clegg. She was the daughter of Molly Clegg and Tom J.T. Clegg, Tom Clegg, and so I just wanted to say some things about that. And my memory goes back under 5 years old because I don't remember. I know my father died when I was 5 years old, and I remember a few things that happened. I know that once we were on a train, and I know my father was sick, and we was on a caboose, and we lived in a little country town, and we would ride a caboose. I think we had to maybe pay $1 or something like that, or whatever it was, maybe 50 cents to ride some short distances, and we would ride the caboose that distance and get off there on a caboose of a freight train. So I know we were in the caboose, and I was with my father, and we were going to either to my grandfather's or back to my home. And I don't know which, but my mother wasn't along, just the two of us, and I know my father got real sick, and he was pretty poorly in the time when after I was born anyway, I guess, and well, not all the time, but later in that period, I guess, that when we went on the train that time, well, he got real sick, and so I had to get him the spittoon. They had those big old brass spittoons then, like you see once in a while now. They're antiques. They had those there, and so my father got real sick, and I grabbed that for him and took it over there, and I don't know if he used it or not, but he was very, very sick, and I remember getting it for him anyway, and that's the end of that trip. I don't remember. And then we go back. I remember a few incidents at my grandfather's house when my father was still living, but nothing in particular. But when my father was sick, I remember them rolling him in the bed, and first one thing another there, and trying to make him comfortable. And when my father died, he chewed tobacco. I know he chewed tobacco then, and he had tobacco in his mouth when he started to, his last time was up, and so they was working with him there to try to get that out of his mouth so he wouldn't choke or strangle or whatever, and I remember that, and of course I didn't really know he was passing away or anything like that. I didn't know how serious it was, but I knew he was awful sick. So I was just standing there watching him, and I remember all of that. And then I remember that my mom starts going around the house there, and she was crying, and she was carrying my little brother and me and my sister. I had a sister younger than me and a little brother younger than her. And at the time, I was 5 years old. My father was 45 years old. At that time, well, I guess he was 45 when I was born. I don't remember exactly, but about that. And so I remember following my mother around the house, and my mother was crying, and like people do when something like that happens. But I didn't really understand, but I knew. I guess they prepared me or something, because I realized that my father was not going to be with us anymore. And so I remember several incidences there. I remember the man built a box in the yard in my father's mother's yard, Grandma Miller's yard, and he had it on some, or he built it out of a pine box. It was pine lumber, And he built a nice coffin out of pine wood, and he done lots of sanding, and he used lots of, screws, and put the handles on and whatever, and it was really nice. And I had the privilege of watching him do all that, and I remember that very well. And the day that we went to put him away, I remember all the wagons, whatever there were several wagons and some buggies and a hack. They called a hack. It was a long coupled type small wheels on the hack, and it was kind of like a buggy, but it didn't have it had a bed on it instead of seats and stuff. So they hauled him on that. And when they got to the graveyard, I don't even know, I never did find out where it was at, but I think it's near Ninnekal, Oklahoma, somewhere in there. And so when I went to, they went to take him in there, I remember that some of the things that went on during the time before they let him down. And I remember watching them take the lines off of some of the teams, and of one of the teams, in other words, they taken the lions that they drive them with, and they put them underneath the coffin, and there was 4 men let him down into the ground, down into the other pine box or whatever it was. I don't know of anything down there. Don't remember any more of that. And then that was the end of that today. That day I don't remember anything else. But then I remember being back at my grandmother's, and I remember that we went. My mother had to go, and the next day or so, maybe the next day, I'm not sure. But my mother had to go cut wood in the woods with my father's brother, and so my grandmother wouldn't keep us children there at the house, and she made my mother take us children with her to the woods. Well, I remember something about the woods a little. I remember watching my mother saw wood out there in the woods with my father's brother, but I don't know anything about the consequences or whatever. But I know we didn't stay there very long, because my grandfather, I know my grandfather and grandmother never got to the funeral, my father's funeral, but they did, I think they sent for us. I'm not even sure about that, but and I think my Uncle King, I don't know my father's brothers, all their names, but the younger brother was named Edgar Miller, and one was named King Miller, and one was named Harrison Miller, and so I did get to see Harrison Miller several times. Well, we lived close to them one time in the future, after my father passed away sometime after. But I don't remember anything about any of his sisters, and don't know any of their names. My mom did tell me a few times, but I didn't write them down or anything. One brother, my father's brother, was named Jimmy. Jimmy Miller, later in years, I found out that he was a preacher, and he dedicated a church in Elk City, Oklahoma, and I lived out in the country. But I didn't get to attend that or meet him or anything there, because I didn't know about it until we got the paper on Monday after he was gone. So that I don't know about anymore. So anyhow, and get back to that, where we was, I suppose Grandpa sent us some money to come home on. I'm not sure. But anyway, we went to Grandpa's house, and from there, and when we got to Grandpa's house, I remember on the way to Grandpa's house, my father was a hunter. He liked to hunt, and he had these 2 dogs that he was very fond of, and And those dogs were so fond of him that it was awful there. So anyway, it must have been soon after my father died that the dogs, Mom said, would just sit out and howl and howl and howl, and she scold them, and they'd go off and stay a while and come back. And one of the dogs was named Whitefoot, and one was named Rat. Well, when they came back in, Whitefoot was all chewed up, and Mom didn't know what to do to him or anything, but she was doing a lot of howling and howling and howling, and Mom scolded him and made him shut up. So he left. He wasn't gone well, in fact, he never did come back. So Mom don't know what happened to him, and he was all chewed up though, from something. We don't know what chewed him up, but he never did come back. And then when we went to Grandpa's, anyhow, well, we took Rat with us, and on the way, from after we got off the train and Grandpa met us, he was in a wagon, and he had to come and meet us 20 miles, and it was about, when he didn't have a load, it had taken him about, I guess 6 or 7 hours to make that 20 miles in the wagon, and so we was going in, and when before we got to Grandpa's, it got dark, and when we got to Grandpa's house, why, the little doggy wasn't with us. He was following the wagon all the way in daylight, and we didn't have any problem with him following the wagon. He knew we were in the wagon. When we got to Grandpa's, he wasn't in the wagon, so we'd never seen him anymore. We don't know what happened to him, if he went back to the old place or what, but anyway, we didn't see him anymore. And we went on to Grandpa's, and right now I'm going to pause for just a little bit till I kind of remember how things went from there on. So, and I want to get back to some of the things that happened when my father was living there, too. I'll do that the first thing when I come back there.
Of higher level.
I'll go ahead now and talk about a few more things there. I know, right now I think I'll go back and say what Mom told me, some things she told me about my father. And I know he helped build the railroad from Muskogee up, I don't know if it was right up Grand River all the way, but they built the railroad on out north there, and they went through Locust Grove, and they went up through Salina and along the river there. I don't know where the railroad track went from there, but in that area there around like Locust Grove, between Muskogee and Salina, I'll say that my mother and them, I guess they followed the train, the deal. They was in camp anyhow, and there, and Mom said I was about 2 years old when this is the incident that I don't remember anything about, but my mother said that when my father was working on the road, they used teams. They used all teams, and they used those scrapers that there's slips, and they had different kind. I can't think of that other kind one now, but anyway, he was driving 4 mules, and he come by the camp with the mules. They weren't hooked to anything, and he was driving them along, and he drove up to in front of our camp, whatever we was in, I don't know, but anyway, he laid the lines down. When you lay the lines down on a good team that's trained well there, why, they'll stand as long as the lines lays on the ground, but if somebody picked the lines up, why, they'll start walking. And so that's what happened. I came along and picked the lines up, and my father just came out in time to get a hold of them before they started dragging me there, because I was not keeping up too well. Now, that's all I remember of that incident, and I want to get back to where I was at there. So that went way back when I was little, so I wanted to put that in right there. Anyway, when we went, after we was at Grandpa's a while, I don't remember, well, I remember a lot of the little things that happened there, but around Grandpa's place, but I'm not going into all of them unless I just get a few things once in a while about it. But I remember being at Grandpa's quite a lot there for a while, and then I know my mother moved away, and she moved to Chickasha, Oklahoma. Well, no, now before Chickasha, Oklahoma, I'll have to go stop there because that was a little bit too early for Chickasha. But there was an old man, an old fellow. There was a widower, I guess, there that lived in the area somewhere close to my grandmother Miller's place. And after my father died, my mom told me that this old guy, he was much older than my father even. My father was quite a bit older than my mother because my mother was real young when my father died yet, and so she was. I guess my mother wasn't even 20 or about 20. Let me see, 16, 20. She was about 20 or 21 when my father died, and my father was 45 years old. That's the way it was, and my mother was 40. I mean, he was 40 when they married. Anyway, when I get back to that deal there, this old man, he was so nice to Mom and them and helped out and quite a bit and with them and everything. And Mom thought he was just really a nice old man. And he came to Grandpa's house after Mom was already at Grandpa's house. He came to Grandpa's house and proposed to marry Mom, and so, I don't know why she would marry somebody like that, but anyway, she was a widow with 3 little kids, and I guess, and she knew that he, was able to take care of them or whatever there, and I know he didn't have a lot of money or anything like that, but support means a lot to a person like that, I guess, and she had 3 little kids, and she was there with Grandpa and Grandma, no place to go. And so she married him. And I don't remember anything about the marrying part, but I remember him coming there to see her and talking with her and everything. Well, she agreed to marry him, and I don't really, can't remember her living with him anywhere except in Kansas. We did go to Kansas, I know, along about that time, and I was about 6 or 7 years old. We lived in Kansas 2 years, and then after Kansas, well, while we lived in Kansas, I might mention a little of that there. I think they got along pretty good. In fact, they got along a lot better when his daughter wasn't around. He had a daughter that was about my mother's age, and when she was around, it seemed like her and him didn't get along very good. And anyhow, after we lived in Kansas, while we lived in Kansas, I remember some of the people's names that we worked for, that they worked for, and there was Orr's, people named Orr that they worked for a long time, and then they worked for different people. I remember living in the house with in the big house that just us lived in it, but it was just vacant, you might say, and had furniture in it and everything, and they just let us live in there, and we lived in it, and there for a long time, worked for them people, and then we went to another place and worked. I remember one time when it was shucking corn, and Mom was shucking corn right out there with him, and in fact, I've got one of the corn husking picks. I have the corn husking pick right now that my mom used in Kansas there when I was 7 years old. I still had that corn husking pick. My mom left it when she gave us our things there just before she passed away. Well, I found it in there. Anyhow, that's where I lived close to my Uncle Harrison Miller. Uncle Harrison Miller lived in Kansas also, him and Aunt Annie. His wife was named Annie, and they never had no children up until that time. And I remember that they would come and get me and keep me for a week or two at a time. And I had a real good time with Aunt Annie and Uncle Harrison. They was real nice to me. I never met any of the rest of the family after my father died. Never seen any of them except Uncle Harrison and Aunt Annie, and don't remember them talking about them or anything of that kind. We lived there about 2 years, somewhere like that in the 2 years, but and back there, let me see, when we come back, we was back around Grandpa's place. Grandpa furnished us a little house. It wasn't much, it wasn't very big, I know. It was down there in a couple 100 yards from the house, or something like that. Mama and this old man that she married, his name was Bowers. Now, I don't remember his first name, and thank God I don't. Anyway, he was there, and I remember, I don't even know what took place, but I know one night that he beat my mother up, and I was right there and watched him pound her head against the headboard or footboard of the bed, and I tell you, I thought he was killing her. Well, I guess he did almost kill her because blood run from her nose and ears and everything there, and it was pretty serious. And when the noise got out, I guess my uncles and my grandfather and them must have heard it, and they run the old man off at that time, and so he was gone for a while, and he came back, my mother told him no way she would have no more to do with him, and so we never seen him anymore after that for a long, long time. In fact, after she was married again before we ever saw him anymore, and that was the end of him. Well, my mother, we stayed at Grandpa's for a while, and then we went to Chickasha, Oklahoma. Now, I don't remember anything about getting moved up to Chickasha or who caused us to go up there or anything about it. But I do know that Mom got a job in the Apache oil mill in Chickasha, Oklahoma, and she rented a little house up there, and we lived in that little house, and we weren't, I don't remember ever going to school up there or anything. I do remember going to school a few times at Grandpa's house, and I'll not get into that right now, but before that, I remember, but I went to school at Grandpa's house a little bit, but up there in Chickasha, I don't remember going to school, but I know my mom worked at night. She worked a night shift, and we were there alone, and anyway, I don't remember how long she worked at Chickasha or anything about it, but I know that we did live in Chickasha when the armistice was signed, and World War I. That was, in November. I know we lived there then, so I remember going up to town and watching the parade there when they went through all the rigmaroles that they did when war was over. And it was a grand time, but I remember a lot of incidents when we were home and by ourselves, and we had some neighbors there, and they've done a lot of fussing around there, and they weren't very good neighbors or something, but there was, I don't remember what all went on, but I know one time we got in a problem there. They said something about my mother, and we got in fight. It's me and my sister and their two kids, and everybody was just knocking and slanging around there, and then their mother and their grandma come out, and they got in got to arguing in it, and then my mom was trying to sleep, and she come out, and she got in it, and she got talking to them, and they got smart with her, and she come out, and she was about to whip both of them, and so her daughter and her boy and whatever, they're jumping in there and helping. Oh, brother, me and my sister, we jumped in there and we pulled hair and we did a little of everything, and Mom finally made a believer out of both of them, and they were good friends after that. We just really got along fine. The kids, we played together and everything. I don't remember the boy's name or anything, but I'll never forget the girl's name, but don't know if it was her name or a nickname, but everybody called her Boldy, and I remember she was freckle-faced like us, and we were freckle-faced too, but she was freckle-faced, and she had a big old plait in the back of her hair. Her hair was long, had plaited, and we called her Bolty. That's all I remember about that. But anyway, so it was funny in a way when you get to thinking about it, but it wasn't funny then for sure. Anyway, when we later on, I think it was later in 18, let me see, it was 1918 in the fall. I think it was real late that fall when my grandfather came up there, and he brought my stepfather with him. That's not my stepfather, but my uncle. I had an uncle that had married one of Grandpa's daughters, Mama's sister, younger sister than Mom, and she died with the flu. She had died just before that with the flu, and she had 3 little girls, and they were pretty close together, and the baby was just about 3 or 4 months old or something when she passed away, left him with 3 little girls. And my mom had 2 boys and a girl. I was the oldest boy, and I had a sister, and then my youngest brother, my little brother, was there. And so my grandfather just come out and asked my mother, would she marry my stepfather and take care of the children? See, they were Mama's nieces anyway. And so they sat down and talked it over, my grandfather and my what became my stepfather was once my uncle. They talked it over, and they decided that they would get married. So they got married, and I remember we went to Grandpa's from there and stayed at Grandpa's. So they went and got married, and then we moved into a house there close to Doyle, Oklahoma, and Grandpa helped us out some, helped us get started. My stepfather was Bert Simmons. We always called him Uncle Bert. He said he didn't want me to call him Dad or anything like that. And so his oldest daughter called my mother by her first name. I mean, they called her Auntie. And the 2 little girls called my mother Mama. So they were so young, they both called her Mama, and they always did call her Mama until one of them still called her Mama, but till my Mama passed away. But the one that called her Auntie, and both of them are gone now, but the middle girl is the only one that's still living. And she called her Mama, and she still does, but my Mama has passed away now. So anyway, we got this house over there, and we lived over there, I don't know where, somewhere close to Pearl School, not too far from Pearl School, north of Doyle, about 3-4 miles north of Doyle, called the Pearl School. And that's where I went to school at there. And we lived on that back in a kind of, well, it's kind of a low place, pretty close to a little strip of bottom land there. And we started to make a crop. We were going to make a crop that year, and when springtime come, we was there kind of in the winter. And I remember, now when we lived up in Chickasha there, of course, like I said, I was only 8 years old, but there was lots of kids around. Some of them chewed tobacco and whatever, and somehow or another, they enticed me, or I was enticed to something to nip on it, and so I got to messing around with it, and I could chew that pretty good, that peachy plug they was chewing. Well, I guess that's a mild tobacco or something, but when my mama and my stepfather married, he seen me watching him all the time when he'd take a chew tobacco. He noticed me watching him there, and so I better check this tape. It might be stopped there. I'll get back to you later. It looks like there's quite a bit on there yet, so I'll go farther. Anyway, I kept watching him there, and I'm sure I was wanting to chew tobacco because I'd kind of got hooked on that peachy plug, and now I'm only about 9 years old now at this time, so it was in just before spring there. It was still cold weather anyhow when this happened, and so we're going to make a crop that year, and it was a little house. It wasn't very big, I know that, and so we were sitting there, and I was behind the stove, kind of, there was just quite a space there, but I was sitting behind the stove. It was nice and warm, and I was watching him take a chew of tobacco, and he seen me watching him. He had always seen me watching him, I guess, and got the idea that maybe for some reason I might be hankering for a chew of it, and he asked me if I wanted to chew tobacco, and so I know he wasn't trying to get me to chew tobacco or anything, but he was trying to find out, I guess, if I had ever chewed it, and so I told him, oh, no, but he could tell by the way I acted, I guess, that I was really wanting it real bad, and he kept offering it to me, and finally I did. I took a little chew of it, and I chewed it for a little bit, and I started to spit it out, and he chewed brown mule, so brown mule was quite a bit different than peachy plug, so it was strong, and boy, I couldn't stand that, and I was getting warm anyway, and that warmer, and I could feel it coming on, so I told him, and he told me, no, don't throw it out, just chew it, it's just good, And so I did. I could see, I thought I was afraid he would get at me if I didn't, so I went ahead and I chewed it a little longer. Finally, I couldn't take it any longer, and I made a run for the door. And boy, I had a problem, top and bottom, tell you for sure, there, and I ain't going to explain it, but it was something else. So I never liked to chew tobacco anymore, never did want no more tobacco. It didn't interest me when he took to chew tobacco after that, never did. I know in years to come, later on down the line, he had a brother that had a boy that we run together a lot, and he'd do a little of everything. One time we was, folks had went away and left me home to cut the tops off of the sweet potatoes, and so that the sweet potatoes wouldn't get frostbitten. They went to town or somewhere and asked me to cut the tops off the potatoes. It wasn't a big job, it didn't take long, but I went down there to cut them off, and this kid went with me. Well, when we got down there, this kid, my stepfather had tobacco growing in the garden there, and we had quite a lot of tobacco, stalks there, and all you had to do is just pull a leaf off and chew it if you wanted to chew some tobacco. And so this kid, he was chewing on that tobacco, and he's daring me not to chew it. So he was calling me coward. He called me everything, I guess, and I'd always take it, and I just kept taking it, and finally I took all I could take of it, and so I just pulled off a leaf and chewed on it a little bit to satisfy him. oh, I got sicker than a dog, and I threw up all over the place, and I got so sick I couldn't even get the potatoes tops cut off. When I come home, I got in trouble. I don't remember if I got a whipping for it, but I got a lot of whippings. My stepfather never did it, but my mother, she'd paddle me real good. And so I don't know if my stepfather fussed at me a lot. Sometimes my mother would paddle me for whatever it was, but she paddled the girls too whenever his girls, when they needed it, and he was supposed to paddle us. But I don't remember him ever paddling me, but just fussing at me or anything would be enough, I'll tell you for sure. Anyhow, to get back to what we were doing there, we were living at this little house there when Mom and Uncle Bert first married after I took the chew tobacco there. I get back to that. So when springtime come, I know my mother was so awful sick, and it was real early in the spring, and we try to get our crop in and get some cotton planted and whatever, and it rained quite a lot, and everything seemed to be going wrong. And so my mother was awful sick there for a while. My little brother, he got sick, and I don't know to this day what was the matter with him, but he first started by getting lame in one leg. I was going to go do something. I don't remember now what it was that I had to go do. Maybe I was going to, go to a neighbor's house or do something that they were sending me somewhere to do something. And my little brother, or maybe we was going after the horses or whatever, but my little brother was supposed to go with me, and he tried to go with me. We went a little ways, and his leg hurt so bad he couldn't stand it, and I took him back to the house, and I went ahead and did it. Well, he right after that, he went into a high fever, and so he had a high fever, and him and Mom had a high fever at the same time there for several days. I don't remember how long, but I know I could ride a horse. Ever since I've been big enough they'd set me on one. I could ride a horse long before I could get off and on one. And I remember even before that, my grandfather would send me, before that I remember when we was at Grandpa's, he'd send me 3 miles with a mule. Send me 3 miles with the mule there to get her shod, because he had this one old mule, old Kate. Old Kate, now, she'd pull her shoes off if they turned her in the pasture. If they kept her in the corral, it's okay, but whenever she wouldn't wear shoes in the pasture, she'd go to a stump. She'd find a stump, and she would hang them over a stump. I don't know how an old mule ever got that smart, but old mules, they do have a little bit of sense there, and they act like they don't have none. But old Kate was a white mule, I remember, and she just wouldn't wear her shoes there if they turned her in the pasture. So every time she'd pull her shoes off, my grandpa would send me back to the blacksmith, or he'd take her or something, but a lot of times he'd send me. It was 3 miles down there to the blacksmith, and he would put me on old Kate, and I'd go down there, and I'd get off, of course, by myself, but when the blacksmith got through putting shoes on her, he put me back on her, and Kate went back home. And so there was no problem there. But I remember that I learned to ride real young there for sure. And when I went to that, and my little brother was sick, my mama and my little brother was real sick there, and I had to go get the doctor. Now, the doctor didn't live very far from us. When we come out on the main road, that was the doctor's house. But we had to go down around through some fields and stuff, and down around that creek there, and it seems like 2 or 3 miles, but I'm sure it wasn't over a mile or a mile and a quarter. But I would run out there to the corral, and I was 9 years old, remember? I'd run out there to the corral and get one of our horses, and we never had saddle horses, and we didn't have no saddle. We had small horses, and they was all rideable. So I'd run out there and got my choice, and which was Old Nick, and I would get on Old Nick, and I would go for the doctor, and I had to go for the doctor. And sometimes I'd go two or three times in one night, and the doctor would always come. And they weren't like the doctors today. You know, if they thought you were serious, they would come. And so I can't even right offhand. I don't remember the doctor's name, but I know the girl he married was Sally Hogue, and I can't somehow or another can remember his name. But anyway, I had to go down there, and it'd be pitch dark. And I went and elope all the time. I'd always go and elope because in a hurry, scared of what's out there, and also scared that my mom was going to die or my little brother. And I'd go for the doctor and come back. And one of the times that I came back, I stopped the horse in the corral, and then I had to run down in this ditch and up the other side and to the house there. And of course I was running, it was in the night in the dark, and the doctor would come up later with his buggy or whatever he came in. I don't remember if he come in a buggy or horseback, but he didn't drive the car, I'm sure. Anyway, when I run down there, I run over a garden hole that was all real sharp, and boy, I hit that with my foot, and I didn't have on no shoes or anything. I cut my foot. I guess I just almost cut my toe off, because that one toe on that side there, my toe next to the big toe, is much longer than the others, than the other toes there. It kind of lengthened out there for some reason there, cut it in the joint. Anyhow, when I went back there, well, a few times I run for the doctor, but my mom and my little brother was awful sick, and us or the doctor didn't know if he was either one of them was going to make it or not. And so, and at nighttime, there's screech owls in the woods down there, about a half a quarter or something like that from the house, across the cornfield there. There was that little ravine there, or creek bottom. Called it a creek bottom there, there was trees in there, and his owls would get in there, and they'd screech and screech and screech, and my mom would go into spasms, and my little brother. So I'd have to go down there in the dark by myself, go down there all the way down into that field and beat on the corn stalks and holler and whatever, or something, to throw things into the trees and to scare them out of there. And sometimes they'd do that 2 or 3 times a night, and I'd run them away, and they'd stay for a few hours. And my stepfather was staying right with the folks there, and so he couldn't get away, and so I'd have to do it. And I was the oldest one, and I'd go down there and do that, and it was kind of disagreeable, I tell you for sure. A little bit later then, I don't know, just anyhow, my little brother passed away, and we never got well. And so he passed away, and we buried him. They buried him over in Owens Prairie, at the Owens Prairie graveyard, and that's right near Winkler's Corner, and now they call it something else. And I was there last year. I went there, but there was no markers or anything. I couldn't find his graves. I don't know if I'll ever find out or not, but I want to try, if I ever get to go back again at the county seat, and see if I can find the location so I can mark his grave. Anyway, in the same graveyard there, my aunt, my mother's sister, is buried there, and several other people that I know. And I want to go back there sometime if I can before. See, I'm 80 years old now, past 80, and I'm also fixing to have an operation pretty soon there for prostate cancer, and don't know what the deal is, but if I have my health, I'm going to go back next year, and I've got a few things I want to take care of. Anyhow, my mother got better after that. My mother pulled through, and she got all right, and so by that time, now that was in the springtime, kind of, we were so far behind with our crops, the crabgrass, and we had crabgrass in that country, and it rained quite a lot, and you could just barely see the cotton through the crabgrass, and it was all yellow and whatever there, and boy, I don't guess that they would have probably had to plow it up, but somebody reported us being sick over there, and something happening, like we were in need. And one morning, somebody rode up there on horseback and said he had come over